The rain hammered against the windows of Platform 7 as I checked my watch for the third time in as many minutes. 11:47 p.m. The last train to Edinburgh should have arrived 13 minutes ago, but the departure board still blinked its maddening message: delayed. I wasn't alone on the platform, though I wished I were. An elderly woman sat motionless on a bench, her face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. A businessman in a rumpled suit paced near the edge, muttering into his phone, and there was a young couple, pressed close together, whispering urgently about something I couldn't quite hear. The station was wrong. I'd been through King's Cross hundreds of times, but tonight something felt off. The fluorescent lights flickered with a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate, and the usual bustle of even late-night London was conspicuously absent. No announcements echoed through the speakers, no staff walked the platforms, just us five, waiting. At 11:58 p.m., a train emerged from the tunnel. It shouldn't have surprised me this was what we'd been waiting for. After Albert, something about the way it materialized from the darkness made my skin crawl. No warning rumble, no approaching headlights. Just suddenly there, as if it had always been there and I'd only just noticed. The train was old, not vintage, not charming, just old. The paint was faded to an indeterminate grey, and the windows were dark despite the lights I could see burning inside. The carriages stretched far beyond what I could see in either direction, disappearing into shadow at both ends of the platform. Finally, the businessman said, shouldering past me toward the nearest door. The doors hissed open, and a wave of stale air washed over us. It smelled of dust and something else, something organic and unpleasant that I couldn't quite place. The young couple hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances, but the elderly woman rose from her bench with surprising grace and stepped aboard without a moment's pause. I should have waited for the next train. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stay on that platform, to call a cab, to walk if I had to. But it was midnight. I had an interview in Edinburgh at 9 a.m., and this was the last train. Logic trumped instinct. I climbed aboard. The interior was worse than the exterior had promised. The upholstery on the seats was torn and stained, showing yellow foam underneath. The lighting came from fixtures that must have been installed decades ago, casting everything in a sickly amber glow. And it was hot and comfortably hot, despite the autumn chill outside. I found a seat in the middle of the carriage and dropped my bag on the empty seat beside me. The businessman had claimed a spot near the door, already on his phone again. The couple sat near the back, still whispering. The elderly woman had disappeared, presumably into another carriage. At precisely midnight, the doors closed with a definitive thunk, and the train lurched forward. For the first 20 minutes, everything seemed almost normal. The train swayed gently as it gathered speed, and the darkness outside pressed against the windows. The businessman eventually put away his phone and closed his eyes. The couple fell silent, the girl resting her head on the boy's shoulder. I tried to read, but I couldn't focus. That smell, the one from when the doors first opened, was getting stronger. Worse, it was making my eyes water and my stomach turn. I looked around to see if anyone else noticed, but the others seemed That's when I realized the train hadn't stopped. We should have reached Peterborough by now, but we just kept moving, faster and faster. The world outside an impenetrable black. I stood up, suddenly desperate to find a window that showed something. Anything. I walked toward the back of the carriage, past the couple who now sat rigid and unmoving, their eyes wide and staring at nothing, past empty seats that I could have sworn were occupied when I'd walked by them moments before. The door at the end of the carriage was stuck. I pulled at it, twisted the handle, even kicked it, but it wouldn't budge. Through the small window, I could see the next carriage, and what I saw made my blood freeze. Bodies, dozens of them, hanging from the overhead rails by their arms, swaying with the motion of the train. Their faces were obscured by shadow, but I could see enough to know they weren't moving, weren't breathing. I spun around, my heart hammering, ready to run back to my seat, to alert the others, to pull the emergency brake, anything. But the carriage had changed. The seats were empty now, all of them. The businessman was gone. The couple was gone. Even my bag had vanished from where I'd left it. The rain hammered against the windows of Platform 7 as I checked my watch for the third time in as many minutes. 11:47 p.m. The last train to Edinburgh should have arrived 13 minutes ago, but the departure board still blinked its maddening message: delayed. I wasn't alone on the platform, though I wished I were. An elderly woman sat motionless on a bench, her face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. A businessman in a rumpled suit paced near the edge, muttering into his phone, and there was a young couple, pressed close together, whispering urgently about something I couldn't quite hear. The station was wrong. I'd been through King's Cross hundreds of times, but tonight something felt off. The fluorescent lights flickered with a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate, and the usual bustle of even late-night London was conspicuously absent. No announcements echoed through the speakers, no staff walked the platforms, just us five, waiting. At 11:58 p.m., a train emerged from the tunnel. It shouldn't have surprised me, this was what we'd been waiting for. After Albert, something about the way it materialized from the darkness made my skin crawl. No warning rumble, no approaching headlights. Just suddenly there, as if it had always been there, and I'd only just noticed. The train was old, not vintage, not charming, just old. The paint was faded to an indeterminate grey, and the windows were dark despite the lights I could see burning inside. The carriages stretched far beyond what I could see in either direction, disappearing into shadow at both ends of the platform. Finally, the businessman said, shouldering past me toward the nearest door. The doors hissed open, and a wave of stale air washed over us. It smelled of dust and something else, something organic and unpleasant that I couldn't quite place. The young couple hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances, but the elderly woman rose from her bench with surprising grace and stepped aboard without a moment's pause. I should have waited for the next train. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stay on that platform, to call a cab, to walk if I had to. But it was midnight. I had an interview in Edinburgh at 9 a.m., and this was the last train. Logic trumped instinct. I climbed aboard. The interior was worse than the exterior had promised. The upholstery on the seats was torn and stained, showing yellow foam underneath. The lighting came from fixtures that must have been installed decades ago, casting everything in a sickly amber glow. And it was hot, and comfortably hot, despite the autumn chill outside. I found a seat in the middle of the carriage and dropped my bag on the empty seat beside me. The businessman had claimed a spot near the door, already on his phone again. The couple sat near the back, still whispering. The elderly woman had disappeared, presumably into another carriage. At precisely midnight, the doors closed with a definitive thunk, and the train lurched forward. For the first 20 minutes, everything seemed almost normal. The train swayed gently as it gathered speed, and the darkness outside pressed against the windows. The businessman eventually put away his phone and closed his eyes. The couple fell silent, the girl resting her head on the boy's shoulder. I tried to read, but I couldn't focus. That smell, the one from when the doors first opened, was getting stronger. Worse, it was making my eyes water and my stomach turn. I looked around to see if anyone else noticed, but the others seemed That's when I realized the train hadn't stopped. We should have reached Peterborough by now, but we just kept moving, faster and faster, the world outside an impenetrable black. I stood up, suddenly desperate to find a window that showed something, anything. I walked toward the back of the carriage, past the couple who now sat rigid and unmoving, their eyes wide and staring at nothing, past empty seats that I could have sworn were occupied when I'd walked by them moments before. The door at the end of the carriage was stuck. I pulled at it, twisted the handle, even kicked it, but it wouldn't budge. Through the small window, I could see the next carriage, and what I saw made my blood freeze. Bodies, dozens of them, hanging from the overhead rails by their arms, swaying with the motion of the train. Their faces were obscured by shadow, but I could see enough to know they weren't moving, weren't breathing. I spun around, my heart hammering, ready to run back to my seat, to alert the others, to pull the emergency brake, anything. But the carriage had changed. The seats were empty now, all of them. The businessman was gone. The couple was gone. Even my bag had vanished from where I'd left it. And at the far end, standing in the doorway I'd entered through, was a conductor. He was tall, impossibly tall, having to hunch to fit under the ceiling. His uniform was the same faded gray as the train itself, covered in stains that looked disturbingly like dried blood. But it was his face that paralyzed me, or rather, the lack of it. Where his features should have been was nothing but smooth, pale skin, like an unfinished sculpture. "Tickets," he said, though his mouth didn't move because he had no mouth. The word simply appeared in my mind, cold and invasive. I bought it online," I stammered, fumbling for my phone. "It's on my app." "Tickets," he repeated, moving toward me with long, jerking steps that didn't quite sync with the motion of his legs. My phone was dead. Of course it was. I pressed the power button frantically, but the screen remained black. "I have a ticket. I paid for it. I have a confirmation email." He was 3 feet away now, and I could see that his hands weren't hands at all, but something else, something with too many fingers that ended in points rather than nails. "Everyone pays," he said, eventually. I ran. There was nowhere to go, but I ran anyway, toward the door I'd tried before. This time it opened easily, swinging inward to reveal the carriage beyond. The hanging bodies were still there, but now I could see their faces. I recognized some of them, the businessman, the young couple, the elderly woman, and others, so many others. Years worth of passengers, decades perhaps. all hanging there in the eternal fluorescent gloom. "One more for collection," the conductor said behind me. I kept running, carriage after carriage, each one the same. More bodies, more faces frozen in silent screams. The smell was overwhelming now, the heat oppressive. My lungs burned, my legs felt like lead. Finally, I burst through a door and found myself in what looked like a luggage car. It was darker here, the only light coming from the carriages behind and ahead. I could hide here, I thought. I could wait him out, and when the train finally stopped, but the train would never stop. I understood that now with horrible clarity. This wasn't a train to Edinburgh. This wasn't even a train to anywhere real. It was a collection vehicle, gathering up the lost and the late, the ones who made the wrong choice at the wrong time. Like me. The door behind me opened. "Please," I begged, though I knew it was useless. "I don't want to die." The faceless conductor tilted his head, considering. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something like pity in the blank expanse where his face should have been. "You're not going to die," he said, and somehow that was worse than any other answer he could have given. He raised one of those terrible hands, and I felt something cold wrap around my consciousness, pulling me down. Down into darkness, deeper than the tunnel we'd emerged from, deeper than the night outside the windows. The last thing I saw before everything went black was my own reflection in one of the grimy windows. I was hanging from the overhead rail, swaying gently with the motion of the train, my eyes wide and staring. The Midnight Express doesn't stop for anyone. It just keeps moving through the darkness, collecting passengers who will ride forever. And somewhere, on some rainy platform at some forgotten station, 5 more people are checking their watches and wondering why their train is delayed. They should run, they should take a cab, walk, do anything but wait. But they won't. They never do. And at midnight, the train will come for them too, emerging from the tunnel like a memory of something that should have been forgotten. Its windows dark and its carriages full of passengers who paid a fare they didn't know they were agreeing to. The doors will open with that familiar hiss, and they'll climb aboard, because logic always trumps instinct, even when instinct is screaming at you to run. I woke to the sound of screaming. Not my own though, God knows I had reason enough, but someone else's. A woman's voice, raw and desperate, echoing through the carriages like a siren. My eyes snapped open, and for a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was or what had happened. Then it all came rushing back. I was hanging, my arms were stretched above my head, wrists somehow fixed to the overhead rail, my feet dangling inches above the floor. The carriage swayed with the train's endless motion, and I swayed with it, a puppet on invisible strings. I tried to move, to pull myself free, but my body wouldn't respond. It was as if I was trapped inside myself, a passenger in my own flesh. The screaming stopped abruptly, cut off mid-streak, then came the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming closer. Through the window in the door, I saw him, the faceless conductor, moving from body to body with methodical precision. He would stop at each hanging passenger, tilt his head in that unsettling way, and reach up with those terrible hands. Whatever he did, I couldn't see, but each time he moved on, the passenger behind him seemed somehow diminished. Less there, he was feeding, harvesting, collecting something from us. Terror gave me the strength to try again. I concentrated every ounce of will I had into my right hand, trying to make the fingers move, to grip, to do anything. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with agonizing slowness, my index finger twitched. It wasn't much, but it was something. The conductor was 3 bodies away now. 2. The businessman hung beside me, his eyes empty, all trace of the frantic energy I'd seen in him completely gone. Beyond him was the young woman from the couple, tears dried on her cheeks, her boyfriend nowhere to be seen. 1 body away. I could see the conductor more clearly now. Up close, his face wasn't just blank, it was wrong in ways that hurt to look at. The skin rippled and moved as if something underneath was trying to get out, or perhaps trying to form features it had once possessed but could no longer remember how to shape. He reached for the businessman, and that's when I heard it. A voice so faint I almost missed it beneath the rattle and hum of the train. "Fight." I turned my head, I could move my head. Nan saw the elderly woman, she hung at the far end of the carriage, but unlike the others, her eyes were focused, alert. She was looking directly at me. "Fight it," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "Don't let it take you, not completely." The conductor finished with the businessman and turned toward me. This close, I could smell him, that same organic rot I'd noticed when first boarding the train, but 1,000 times stronger. It was the smell of things that should have died long ago, but somehow hadn't. The stench of existence prolonged beyond all natural limits. His hand reached up, those too many fingers spreading like the legs of a spider. "No," I said, or tried to say. It came out as barely a whisper, but it came out. My voice, my will. The conductor paused, his head tilted, and though he had no eyes, I felt his gaze boring into me. Interesting, he said, the word appearing in my mind like ice water. This one has fight. His fingers touched my forehead. Pain, unimaginable pain, as if every nerve in my body had been set on fire simultaneously. I felt him inside my head, rifling through my memories like someone going through a filing cabinet. My childhood, my first love, the death of my father, my graduation, that interview I'd never make it to in Edinburgh. Everything that made me who I was, pulled out and examined and consumed. I felt pieces of myself disappearing. Not dying, that would have been a mercy. Just ceasing to exist, erased as if they'd never been. My 7th birthday party, gone. The name of my first dog, gone. The face of my best friend from university, gone. Stop, I screamed, and this time it came out loud, full-throated, real. The conductor jerked back, his hand leaving my forehead. For a moment, we hung there, him standing on the floor, me dangling from the rail staring at each other. Or rather, me staring at the blank space where his face should have been. You resist, he said, and there was something like surprise in the mental voice. They all resist at first, but you resist still, even now. I didn't know how, I just knew I wasn't going to let this thing take me without a fight. I'd lost too much already, friends to time and distance, family to age and accident, opportunities to fear and hesitation. I wasn't losing myself, not like this. Not to this. Fuck you, I said, putting every ounce of defiance I had into the words. The conductor's head tilted the other way. Then, impossibly, I heard laughter, not out loud. He had no mouth to laugh with, but in my mind, cold and alien and utterly without humor. Very well, he said. Let us see how long you can maintain this resistance. He moved on to the next passenger, and I sagged in relief. But the elderly woman was shaking her head. Fool, she hissed. You should have let him take you quickly. Now he'll make you last. Make you watch. Make you understand what you've become. What do you mean? I managed to ask. Speaking was getting easier, as if whatever held me was loosening its grip, or adapting. I wasn't sure which. Look down, she said. Look at your feet. I did at first. I didn't understand what I was seeing. My shoes looked normal. My trousers looked normal. But then I focused on where they met the floor, rather. Where they should have met the floor, but didn't, because there was no floor beneath me anymore. I was hanging in darkness, and below me, far, far below, I could see lights. Thousands of them. Millions. Cities, I realized. Countries. The entire world. Spread out like a map seen from an impossible height. We weren't on a train anymore. Or rather we were, but the train wasn't on tracks. It was somewhere else. Somewhere between, perhaps. A space that existed outside normal reality, collecting and carrying its cargo through channels that had nothing to do with geography or physics. Where are we? I whispered. Everywhere and nowhere, the elderly woman replied. The train runs through the spaces between spaces. It has routes in every city, every town, every forgotten station where people wait alone at night, and it never stops, never rests. It just collects and collects and collects. How long have you been here? She laughed, but there was no humor in it, only bitter resignation. I don't remember years, decades, perhaps. Time doesn't work the same way here. You'll learn that soon enough. There has to be a way out, I said. There has to be. Oh, there is, she said. Die. Really, truly, die. Let yourself go completely. Stop fighting. Stop thinking. Stop being. That's the only exit from the Midnight Express. I looked at the other passengers hanging around us. The businessman, the young woman, all those others in the carriages ahead and behind. How many of them had already taken that exit? How many were still trapped inside their own heads, screaming silently, unable to even die properly? I won't, I said. I won't give up. Then you'll hang here forever, the elderly woman said, aware, conscious, watching as the train collects more and more passengers, decade after decade, century after century. Is that really better? I didn't answer because I didn't know. But I knew I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. The conductor had finished his rounds and disappeared into the next carriage. For a moment, the only sound was the rhythm of the train, that endless clickety-clack that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then I felt it, a tingling in my fingers, spreading up my arms, into my shoulders. I could move. Not much, not easily, but I could move. I gripped the rail above my head and pulled, trying to lift myself, trying to free my wrists from whatever invisible force held them. The effort made my muscles scream, made my vision blur, but I kept pulling. Stop, the elderly woman said urgently. If he catches you trying to escape, it'll be worse. So much worse. How do you know? I gasped between efforts. Her silence was answer enough. I kept pulling. inch by agonizing inch. I lifted myself until I could see where my wrists met the rail. There was nothing there. No rope, no chain, no physical restraint of any kind. My wrists simply ended at the rail, as if they'd been welded there by some force I couldn't see or understand. But if there was no physical restraint, maybe I thought about letting go, really thought about it. Imagined my hands opening, my fingers relaxing, my arms falling to my sides. I visualized it with every detail I could muster, made it real in my mind, and slowly and possibly my right hand began to open. The conductor's voice slammed into my mind like a sledgehammer. No. Pain exploded through every nerve. My hand clamped back around the rail, tighter than before. I screamed, the sound raw and animal. He was back, standing right in front of me, having crossed the entire carriage in an instant. This close, I could see things moving under his skin. Faces, I realized. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All the passengers he'd consumed over the years. Trapped beneath the surface, their mouths open in silent screams. "You will not escape," he said. "You will hang, you will feed me. And when you are empty, when every memory and thought and dream has been consumed, you will continue to hang, a shell, a warning to the others. This is your fate. Accept it." "No," I said, though my voice was barely a whisper. "Then suffer." He reached out, and this time when his fingers touched me, the pain was different, worse. It wasn't physical, it was existential. He was unmaking me, pulling apart the very fabric of my being, thread by thread. I felt my resistance crumbling, felt myself starting to slip away. It would be so easy to just let go, to stop fighting, to accept the inevitable. Then I heard it again, that voice. But this time, it wasn't the elderly woman, it was my father. "Don't give up, kid. You never give up. That's not who we are. Impossible." My father had been dead for 3 years. This had to be a trick, a hallucination, something the conductor was using to break me, but it didn't matter. Real or not, it was exactly what I needed to hear. I grabbed onto that voice like a lifeline and pulled myself back from the edge of oblivion, pulled my consciousness back together, pulled and pulled and pulled until something snapped. Not in me, in the connection between me and the conductor. I felt it break like a guitar string pulled too tight, and suddenly his fingers were no longer inside my head. He stumbled back, and if he'd had eyes, I imagined they would have been wide with shock. "Impossible," he said. "No one breaks free. No one." "I just did," I said, and meant it. The elderly woman was staring at me, her mouth open. How? I didn't know how. I just knew that something had changed. The invisible bonds holding me to the rail were weakening. I could feel them fraying, coming apart. The conductor recovered quickly. "It doesn't matter," he said. "You're still on my train. There's nowhere to go, nowhere to run. You'll hang here until you're empty, whether you resist or not." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm going to make you work for every goddamn memory." He laughed again, that cold, mirthless sound. Then let the game begin. He lunged forward, faster than anything that size should be able to move, his hands reaching for my head. I twisted, the bonds holding me loosening just enough to let me move, and his fingers grabbed only air. The motion sent me swinging on my invisible restraints, and for a moment I spun, disoriented. When I stopped, I was facing the window, and I saw something, a flicker of light in the darkness outside. Not the distant city lights far below, but something closer, something moving parallel to the train. Another train. It was there for just a second, a flash of illuminated windows and metal in the endless dark, and then it was gone. But in that second, I saw something that made my heart leap. People, normal people, sitting in normal seats, reading books, looking at phones, existing in the real world. The regular train, the one that should have been at platform 7, running alongside us in normal space, so close and yet impossibly far away. A way out. The conductor was coming at me again, and this time I wasn't fast enough. His hands clamped around my head, and the pain started anew. I felt my memories of the last hour beginning to dissolve boarding the train, seeing the hanging bodies, talking to the elderly woman, all of it starting to fade. But I'd seen the other train, and even as the memory of seeing it began to slip away, I held on to one simple truth. There was another way. There was escape. I just had to find it. The conductor released me, and I sagged, gasping. More of me was gone now. I could feel the holes where memories used to be, like missing teeth. "How long will you last?" the conductor asked. "Days, weeks. You cannot win. You can only postpone the inevitable." "Then I'll postpone it," I said, "for as long as I can." He moved on to the other passengers, continuing his rounds. I watched him work, trying to understand the pattern, the process. He spent more time with some than others. The ones who were still fighting, still aware, seemed to give him more. The ones who'd already let go gave him almost nothing. So fighting wasn't just about preserving myself. It was about making me more valuable to him, more worth keeping around, which meant there had to be a limit, a point where the effort of keeping me exceeded what he could extract. If I could find that point, if I could push past it. You're thinking too loud, the elderly woman said. He can hear thoughts, especially clear ones. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Despite her situation, despite hanging here for who knows how long, she was still herself, still aware, still thinking. How are you still here? I asked quietly. If he's been feeding on you all this time, why aren't you empty? She smiled, and it was a terrible thing, because I learned the trick, the secret. I give him something, but not everything. I feed him just enough to keep him satisfied, but I hold back the core, the essential me. Lies, she said simply. I create false memories. Imagine things that never happened, give them texture and detail and emotion. And when he comes to feed, I offer him those instead of the real memories. He can't tell the difference. It was brilliant. Horrible, but brilliant. Teach me, I said. Why should I? You'll just be competition, another passenger taking his attention. The more of us who fight, the longer he keeps us all here, or the more of us who fight, the better chance we all have of finding a way out, I countered. She considered this. In the distance I could hear the conductor moving through the next carriage, his heavy footsteps echoing. Fine, she said finally, but quickly. Think of something that never happened, something plausible, a conversation you never had, a place you never went. Make it vivid, give it smells and sounds and feelings, then hold it in your mind, right at the surface, so when he reaches for you, he takes that instead of something real. I imagined a birthday party that never happened, my father still alive, laughing at some joke, my mother bringing out a cake, friends I hadn't seen in years gathered around, but it felt false, empty, like a photograph of something real, not the real thing itself. It won't work, the elderly woman said, watching me struggle. You need more practice, more time. But the conductor was back. He'd finished his rounds faster than before, and now he stood in the center of the carriage, that blank face turned toward both of us. Sharing secrets, he said. How touching, but it won't help. I've heard every trick, every strategy, every desperate plan to resist. They all fail eventually. Maybe, the elderly woman said, her voice steady, but eventually can be a very long time. Indeed, the conductor agreed, and I have nothing but time. He turned and walked away, through the door into the next carriage. But before he disappeared, he paused and looked back at us. Enjoy your hope while it lasts, he said. It makes the feeding so much sweeter when it finally dies. Then he was gone, and we were left hanging in the dim amber light, swaying with the endless motion of the Midnight Express. I tested my bonds again. They were definitely weaker now. Whatever I'd done before, whatever had broken that connection, had had a lasting effect. I could move my hands more freely, could twist my wrists against the invisible restraints. Don't, the elderly woman warned. Not yet. You need to be ready. If you make a move and fail, he'll bind you tighter. Make it impossible to try again. I screamed, and my voice echoed through the void, a thin sound swallowed by infinite darkness. Then my hand hit something solid, metal, warm, real, the other train. I grabbed hold with both hands, pulling myself through some kind of membrane I could feel but not see. A barrier between impossible and real, between nightmare and waking. The membrane resisted, pushing back, trying to keep me out, or maybe trying to keep me in. But I pulled and pulled and pulled, and finally I fell through empty air for about 3 feet and hit the floor of a train carriage. A normal train carriage, with normal seats and normal lighting and normal advertisements on the walls. I looked up, gasping, and saw a dozen faces staring at me in shock. Real faces, with eyes and mouths and expressions. Mate, are you alright? Someone asked. A teenager with headphones around his neck. Where'd you come from? I couldn't answer. I just lay there, gasping, trying to convince myself this was real, that I'd actually made it, that I was free. Through the window, I caught one last glimpse of the Midnight Express. It was pulling away, fading into darkness, and standing in the doorway of that last carriage was the conductor. He was too far away for me to see clearly, but I knew he was looking at me, watching me, waiting, because the Midnight Express never stops. It just keeps running through the spaces between spaces, collecting passengers who make the wrong choice at the wrong time. And somewhere, maybe not tonight, maybe not for years, but somewhere, sometime I'd find myself on a platform again, late at night, alone, waiting for a train that's been delayed. And the Midnight Express would come for me. It always did. Seriously, mate, do you need help? The teenager asked. Should I get the conductor? The word made me flinch. No, I said quickly. No conductor. I'm fine. I just, ... fell from where? There's nothing above us but roof. I didn't answer. How could I? Instead, I pulled myself up into a seat and stared out the window, watching the normal darkness of a normal night rushing past. The real train pulled into Peterborough station 20 minutes later. I got off, legs shaky, and stood on the platform breathing real air, feeling real wind on my face. I was alive. I was free. But as I walked toward the exit, I passed a departure board, and there, between the listing for the 7:15 to Leeds and the 7:45 to Norwich, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A single line, flickering as if uncertain whether it should exist. Midnight Express, Platform 7, delayed. I ran out of the station, into the street. Didn't stop running until I'd put several blocks between myself and those tracks. But I knew it didn't matter. Distance meant nothing to the Midnight Express. It ran through spaces between spaces. It could reach me anywhere. Sometime, someday, I'd see it again, and next time, I might not escape. The Midnight Express never forgets a passenger who got away. It just waits, forever, if necessary. Because on the Midnight Express, time doesn't mean anything. Only the collection matters, and I was, now and forever, an unfinished collection. 3 months later, I still haven't ridden a train. I drive everywhere now, or take buses, or walk. My employer thinks I've developed a phobia. My friends think I'm being ridiculous. But they weren't there. They didn't see. They don't know. Sometimes, late at night, I hear a whistle in the distance, a train passing through. And I wonder, is it just a regular train going about its regular business? Or is it the Midnight Express, circling, hunting, waiting for me to let my guard down? I check the time, 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes to midnight, 13 minutes until it comes again. Somewhere, for someone. I pour another cup of coffee and turn on all the lights in my apartment. I won't sleep tonight. I never sleep well anymore. Not since I rode the Midnight Express.